Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Riding Shotgun, where we explore different cities and countries around the world to see how they're dealing with the problem of traffic congestion. I'm your host. Today we are in Chengdu, China. Today, we're going to be taking an early morning ride through the city to see just how bad the traffic is at this time of day. So make sure to like and subscribe for updates. Now let's go for a ride. Alright guys, so here we are, out on the road. It's about 6:30 in the morning. This is normally when I get up to go train at the gym. And look at this. There's absolutely no one on the road. It looks like everyone else in the city is still asleep. Alright, so it's interesting because, when you live somewhere for a long time, you always get used to what that place looks like, and you never really think about it from a different perspective. And I feel like when people visit, they often say things like, wow, you guys are really good at building high-rises, or wow, your metro system is really advanced. But what they don't see, and what I don't normally show on this channel, is how the streets look outside a rush hour. So I thought today would be a good opportunity to do that. Alright, so over here we have a bus rapid transit station. These are all going to be above ground stations because we're not really deep in the urban core. You can see some residential towers there. But yeah, this is kind of the outskirts of town. We're on the outskirts of town right now! And this is actually pretty normal for a lot of Chinese cities. They have this initial outer ring, which is mostly residential. And then you have your business district towards the center. And if you take public transit during peak hours, a lot of the lines will be packed full of people because a lot of those people are commuting from those outer areas into the center of the city to work. And if you watch my videos, you probably already know that most of these Chinese cities were built in very hot climates. Meaning, a lot of the older style buildings have really large shaded areas. It's just part of the design. The shade helps keep the heat out of the buildings. That's why you see a lot of shaded walkways and wide eaves. And you can also see over here that a lot of the newer buildings have glass facades. And this makes sense, because Chengdu is home to several universities, including the prestigious Sichuan University. And because of that, they've constructed a lot of modern glass office buildings to attract businesses to set up shop here. And as you can tell right now, there is absolutely zero traffic. In fact, we're having trouble finding any cars to even film, because most people aren't even awake yet. And this is kind of what I love about living in China. The quality of life is just so much better than anywhere I've ever lived before, especially compared to North America. I mean, imagine being able to go out onto the street in the morning and just breathe clean air. I mean, we've been driving around for like 15 minutes now and we haven't seen a single car. I mean, in Los Angeles, if you dare step foot outside during morning rush hour, you'll get run over. And it's funny because even though this is early in the morning, there are still plenty of delivery trucks on the road. I mean, a lot of places have their own local version of Amazon, but in China, the main one is called Taobao and TMOL, and they use a lot of express delivery companies to ship goods throughout the country. So yeah, there are definitely a lot of deliveries going on. This is something I witnessed a lot when I was traveling through Southeast Asia, which is that there are a ton of street food vendors selling breakfast items. And I've noticed that a lot of them sell the same thing, which is steamed buns. And these are usually filled with things like pork floss or sweet red bean paste. And here is a common sight you'll see throughout many cities in China. A lot of the roads are really well maintained, and the dividers in the middle are lined with trees. And I think this just adds a nice aesthetic element to the city, And it also helps add some green space. And considering that China is a pretty densely populated country, I think this is really important. Yeah, I mean, China does a pretty good job of keeping its cities clean and organized. And if you take a look around, there isn't any graffiti or trash on the streets. And I think part of the reason for that is because people are just more respectful. I've always found that people in China are very polite to each other, and they take pride in their communities. And I remember the first time coming here, I thought the metro stations looked very fancy. I mean, compared to what I'm used to, they just looked a lot nicer. And I realized that this is because people actually take the subway here. I mean, Chengdu has an extensive metro system with over 20 lines. And last year, it was reported that they had over 3 billion riders. So that's like 97% of the entire population of China riding the subway. And even though it's early in the morning, there are already quite a few cyclists on the road. Cycling is definitely becoming more popular in China, although the infrastructure is still lacking. There are some dedicated bike lanes, but a lot of the times you will see bikes sharing the road with cars, and sometimes even on the sidewalks. And this is actually a pretty big problem in a lot of developing countries. The infrastructure wasn't originally built for bicycles, so a lot of the times they end up being on the sidewalk. And I know this can be pretty dangerous, but in a lot of cases, it's either that or risking your life by riding on the road. And I want to take a moment to address something that a lot of people seem to be concerned about. Some people seem to think that I'm putting myself in danger by making these videos, but the truth is that there's really no risk involved. I mean, I'm filming from inside a car, and the driver is fully focused on the road. Plus, he's a local. He knows all the roads and shortcuts, and I trust him with my life. Now, it is true that some of these streets are under construction, and there is heavy machinery involved. However, there are no workers or pedestrians around, so it's really not an issue. Also, I'm sure you guys have noticed that almost every single vehicle we pass is a Chinese brand, and this makes sense, because China is the largest automotive market in the world. In fact, last year, over 24 million vehicles were sold in China. That's nearly double the amount sold in the United States. And I think the reason for this is twofold. One is that a lot of Chinese citizens are now entering the middle class, meaning they have disposable income to buy a car. And two, Chinese car companies have become very competitive. In fact, I did a little bit of research and found out that BYD is now the world leader in battery-powered cars. And in terms of sales, they outsold Tesla by over 100,000 vehicles last year. Alright guys, so we're in a very nice park that overlooks a lake. It's called People's Park, and it's one of the oldest parks in China. You can see lots of people doing Tai Chi and walking around. You know, one thing that I think is pretty cool about China is that the government actually invests heavily in public spaces like this. I mean, in the US, parks are normally run down and neglected, but here they are very clean and well-maintained. And I think this makes a lot of sense because people really value their parks and public spaces. Like whenever there is a holiday, you will see families coming to the park to take photos, and this is something I observed a lot when I was traveling throughout the country. Now, in a lot of Western countries, parks are seen as a place to go for leisure activities, or maybe to meet up with friends. But in China, it's more of a community space where people come to socialize. And a lot of people actually make friends here because you never know who you might run into. You know, I've seen groups of elderly people playing mahjong, and I've seen groups of teenagers playing basketball. You know, when I first came to China, I didn't know anyone, and I was really shy. But I remember thinking how friendly everyone was. Like, people would always smile and say hello. And I remember thinking, wow, this is so different from the US. You know, in the US, I've always felt like there was this invisible barrier between people. And I feel like everyone is just so busy that they do unreally talk to each other. But here in China, I feel like people really value face-to-face interaction, and they really enjoy meeting new people. Well guys, this about wraps up our tour of Chengdu, so make sure to like and subscribe for updates, and I'll see you next time.